Welcome to Under the Microscope. I'm your host, Jenny Germano. Thank you for joining me today. I am excited for this next topic that we are doing. The name of today's episode is Security Strategies and Protecting Your Cannabis Business from Application to Operation. A little bit about my background. I got my start in the cannabis industry in 2009, running and operating vertically integrated cannabis operations. In 2015, I founded my company, 𝗨𝐶 Consulting Service, out here in Denver, Colorado. I have been consulting across the United States for the last 10 years, helping operators prepare for operational readiness. Please give a warm welcome to my next guest, Tony Gallo from Sapphire Risk Advisory Group. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Jenny.
I'm so happy to have you today, and to help our listeners out, for those who don't know you, why don't you go ahead and give a little bit about your background, when you got into the cannabis industry, and what you help people with in the industry?
Sure. We've been in the cannabis industry 12 years, started in 2013. We're the oldest national security consultant company in the cannabis industry nationwide. And we've worked in 37 states, worked with about 800 cannabis clients. Proud to say we just opened our 167th cannabis facility with our clients in New Jersey. And we do three things. We help people with their application process and get approval by their city or their state. We help people with the design of their security, their video, their alarms, their access control, and the build out of that. We don't install equipment, so we work with a lot of the local integrators. And then the third thing is the most important thing. We work as a security director would for a lot of the smaller companies. We call it the 4 to 24 store chains, but anyone that really needs someone to help them with their security, their day-to-day processes, employee honesty, cash management, robbery awareness, and all that. We work with them on their day-to-day security.
I like that once they're open, that you can help them with the educational piece, which I think is really important. Let's dive in. If you could talk about why security is actually critical, just so our listeners know, we're going to start with the license application first, and eventually we will find our way to the getting operational piece. If you could share why security is critical in cannabis licensing.
Sure. So I've been in the high-risk retail business for about 25 years, jewelry, pawn, liquor store, convenience stores, and they're still our clients. But in the cannabis industry, one of the unique things is you have to apply to get approved to open up your business. Like, say, one of our clients is trading cards or collectibles. You need to get a license, business license, but for the most part, that's about the extent that the city gets involved or the state gets involved. In every instance in the United States, you have to apply for a state license. And in most states, you also have to get what's called city resolution or city approval. And then during the licensing process, whether it's a state application you're applying for or a city application that you're looking for approval, they're going to want to understand what your security looks like. A big fear in most states throughout the United States is, do you have a security plan in place that's not going to cause the town or the community to have any kind of issues when it came to robberies, thefts, break-ins, anything that could expose. And the big fear is, like I said, we do high-risk businesses. So we do jewelry stores where there's gold, or firearm stores where there's guns. They do not want cannabis or cannabis products to be illegally removed from your location and then put out on the street.
I've also noticed over the years, I don't even know how long we've known each other, but it feels like maybe it could be even close to a decade. I'm not sure. What I like too that you are involved in is that you go before these city councils, right? The state that you're working in or helping a client, you'll go before that board or that city council, and you'll educate these cities and these towns and these municipalities on security and why it's important, or why it's important to have the structure in your rules and regulations or your local regulations. So I really like that you do that as well.
Yeah, last year I did over 100 city council presentations. I'm doing 2 next week in 2 different states. where I'll be presenting to the city council. And a lot of times you'll have a town that will only allow X amount of cannabis facilities. So they want to understand what their exposure is going to be, who deserves to get that approval or not get that approval. And that's where I come into play. Either I'll meet with the chief of police or I'll meet with city council people. And they do have a big concern about cannabis, especially if it's a new town that doesn't have it. And some of the questions are quite interesting.
I think it's really important. I've worked with a couple small towns here in Colorado, and these towns, they do not know. You would think, oh, Colorado's had regulated cannabis for a while. Why wouldn't they know? But they don't. Some of these places can be 3, 4 hours away, and they have no concept locally of how to inspect these facilities, how to regulate them. And so they are actually looking for help. I kind of want to talk about costs. I know that implementing these plans can be expensive, and then submitting the security plan for the application. Then, let's say we win the license and we get operational. There's also the costs for the actual installation, the equipment, the monitoring, all that stuff. So, what can operators do at this early stage phase, like the licensing phase, to make sure they have enough not only to cover the cost of doing the security plan for the application, but for later on down the road from when they're going to open and that next phase?
I think the important thing is really getting to that design, that security design at the earliest stage that you can. A lot of times we like to get involved even before construction has even started or when an architect is starting the design, so that having worked with over 800 designs, we can give input sometimes to the architect and may save them $20,000, $30,000 in construction costs. So I think it's important for anyone who's applying for a license or anyone that wants to open up their facility to make sure that the security components are taken in consideration. And if there is an architect that's new to this or a GC that's really new to this, making sure that they partner with all of the players to understand what that particular, how can we save on HVAC or how do you save on
Yeah.
cameras, alarms, and so forth.
Yeah, I like that. I think it just comes up a lot. I think we talked a little bit before we started recording that people, they sometimes struggle with some of the pricing or paying a higher number, and then people cut corners or go the cheaper way. That will lead into my next question around what are some common mistakes applicants are making during the application processes regarding security? What kind of things are you seeing out there? Some good examples.
In the application process, a lot of people are just striving to get that approval. And they will have someone do a security design and add way too many cameras. And thinking that is a good thing when it comes to a security of a facility. And I can tell you, having done this, like I said, for over 20 years, if you add too many cameras, it actually takes away and hurts the security. So whether it's a grow facility or a dispensary, I think the important thing at the beginning is to look at what you're suggesting in your application and see if it actually makes sense. Are you telling the state or the city that you're going to build a $50,000 vault when you really needed a $3,000 safe? You're telling them that you're going to install 100 cameras when you really only needed 30 cameras. So I see that as the biggest mistake of sometimes people trying to embellish what they're going to do. And then they have to go back and tell the state that they basically lied to them. And that doesn't start and bode well for that initial conversation.
Have you ever seen that backfire before in somebody?
On many occasions,
Okay.
I've seen states that in cities that have required them and say, no, your security, which should have cost $40,000, you have now indicated is going to cost $175,000, and you will not get a license until you spend that $175,000 on that design because that's what you told us you were going to do. And we made a decision to approve you
Over
and not
someone else.
over somebody else, whether it's armed guards, and now you decide you don't want any guards or something of that nature. So I've seen that backfire on numerous occasions. I've seen locations not even be able to open because it backfired them so much that they couldn't afford to do what they said they were going to do to get approved.
So it sounds like it could cause some massive delays in just the build out and just getting operational, getting open.
There's some states that the inspector, every location cannabis has to be inspected and approved before you get your final license. They'll take that floor plan and they'll walk around and say, on this floor plan you submitted, you said there was going to be a camera here, but there's no camera there. Or there's no alarms. This alarm system's not what you said it was going to be. And they'll be holding that paper in the hand that you've given them 6 months prior and hold you to it.
So basically, they're catching it at the inspection. I know from doing inspections, they walk around with that piece of paper in their hand. They literally do. I just did an inspection. We had 20-something people from the city, the police department, the fire department, and everyone had a diagram in their hand and they're walking around. So that's why I think it's important to work with a security company or a consultant that can help you sort those things out before your inspections. Do you think it's important to do some kind of pre-inspection audit when it comes to security before that inspector comes through to get the license?
Oh, I think it's paramount. You have to be able to review the security for that facility and make sure that it's signed off on and that everything is done properly, that the camera views are proper. And here's one of the huge reasons that people don't realize. So let's say you're geared up for an inspection. You've hired your employees, you're paying your rent, you probably have product you're hoping that is going to come in as soon as you get approval. And the state inspector comes in and says you've done something incorrect when it comes to security. You don't fail where you can never open, but he says, I'll be back in a month to come and do the follow-up review. In that month, you still have to pay those employees and you still have to pay that rent. You still have to pay all those things. Even if it was a week later, it's still another week that you're not generating revenue. And that I see happen constantly throughout the United States, where you fail inspection for whatever reason you failed because you did not do that checklist prior, that prep. And now you got to wait for them to come back and re-inspect your location.
I've watched people go and change things, like where they went to submit the application, say, oh, I need to change something, which is like the biggest no-no. I would never, ever do that because I know exactly what happens when you do it. And all of a sudden, your whole project's delayed by a year. Wait to get your license, do everything you're supposed to do on the license, and when you win it, then you could submit the change, and then use your attorney and go to submit any changes and follow the rules if there's a modification of premise that you have to submit or anything like that. You really do have to be careful, and you do have to have kind of all your ducks in a row. It can cost you a lot of money and time, and time is money as well. Losing time costs you money, not getting operational and generating revenue. Are there any other mistakes that you're seeing people make around the application? I also see sometimes that they'll use that security company to win the license to get on the application, and then once they win it, they go and find a cheaper solution. Have you seen that before?
Yeah, and like I said, we don't install equipment, so we're not an installer. In fact, most of your viewers probably have never met a security consultant in the cannabis industry like Sapphire, because most of the people you meet are wanting to sell you the cameras, the safes, the install, the guard agencies, and so forth. And we come across a lot of times during the application, not only will they change security companies that they put down as their installer, but they'll also change the equipment.
Yeah.
They've gone now and telling the city or the state that they're going to use a camera safe that costs $600. And now they're going to use a camera that costs $100. And that was not what they said they were going to do on the application. And so I've seen that happen a lot, and that's even prior to the actual install. Some applications don't indicate what kind of camera they're going to use. And then when they get to the time, they work with an installer and the installer, if you get 3 bids and one bid says 50,000 and one bid says 48,000 and one bid says 19,000, you might want to question why that one bid said 19,000.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we get involved because we do get people that pick that 19,000 and then they find out later on in life why it cost 19,000.
Later down the road, it rears its ugly head, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we saw that during a few years ago when there were the riots that went on. 83 dispensaries across the United States were broken into, and 23 of them had their safes broken into, and all 23 of them had the wrong safe.
I already know. Let me take a guess. Was it a gun safe?
It was a gun safe. Yes, it
Well,
was. Very good, Jenny. Very
yes.
effective.
Yeah, let's just quickly talk about why we shouldn't use gun safes.
If you think about it, that's the definition of it, is it's designed for guns. It's a safe that is produced. It's a great safe for guns. It's designed to store firearms in it, not cannabis, not cash by any stretch of the imagination. It's designed to be in your house and keep little Johnny from breaking into taking that gun. It's not built as a safe. It's built with sheetrock inside, like the sheetrock on your wall. So, and purposely because sheetrock absorbs heat. So if your house ever caught on fire, the guns would have a level of safety because the sheetrock prevents the heat from coming into and damaging your firearms. But again, the words are there. It's a gun safe. Pawn shops don't use gun safes. CVS and Walgreens don't use gun safes. Whoever decided that they're going to go to Walmart and use a gun safe, I could go to Home Depot and buy a Diamondback cuts, and I can cut into your gun safe and empty it out within minutes.
That was my question too. One, I've seen a lot of gun safes in 10 years. And so that's why I knew exactly what safe you were talking about, because I've seen a lot of gun safes. And that was my next question, is how can they cut through it?
Yeah, Home Depot sells the soy that cuts through, but it's not, again, the sides of the wall are very thin metal with sheetrock layered between it. It's not a safe. It's a storage unit, just like you would put something that you don't want honest people to get into, but it's not designed to prevent somebody who really intentionally wants to get into it, unlike the use of a safe. And whether you're storing your cash or not, and I've seen many people buy a $3,000 gun safe that costs them $200,000 at the end of the day.
And what particular safes are they supposed to buy? Not like, is it a specific safe that it's called?
Yeah. It's called a TL rated safe. Okay. A tool and lock rated safe, and TL15s, TL30s, and there's all different things about that. The jewelry stores use TL rated safes that are much more stronger. Again, the safe is really designed to prevent honest people from going into that who want to do something they normally wouldn't do. They break into the store, and like hurricane season started June 1st nationwide. And we do emergency planning. One of our procedures that we have in hurricanes is if there's a hurricane coming your way, you're going to leave your location. You fill your safe with everything that you can possibly put. Overload it as much as you can. Because even if, God forbid, it was a flood or a hurricane or a roof collapse or whatever, at the end of the day, that safe is like a lifeboat, and you'll eventually get access to that safe, even if it fell down, even if it got flooded. And again, if you have an inferior safe or something of that nature, it's not going to withstand an attack.
I think too, it contains everything, right? So if any of those things happen, it's containing it. It's good to remember, don't cut corners. You shouldn't cut corners with anything, but I know people get stuck on that number. Money drives people's decisions, and sometimes spending a lot of money, and they see the gun safe at Walmart. I think I could go get this for $300. Why would I spend $3 to $5 grand? Why would I spend that when I can just go to Walmart and buy a gun safe? And I think too, some people, they probably look at a gun safe and say, I don't understand, it's a safe. And so I think hopefully this is helpful for anyone who's listening who is like about to buy a gun safe. Hopefully this is an intervention and we stopped you from buying the gun safe.
That's good. We can stop one person from doing something dumb.
We're going to have gun safe interventions in the cannabis industry. My other thing I want to talk about, should applicants vet the security company they're working with? Because I think working on an application, it's very serious, right? You can win or lose that application. Because I've seen people pick the wrong people to work on the application and have that part of the application fail because they worked with the wrong person.
There's two types of ways people get licenses throughout the United States. And the first way is called a merit-based application. A merit-based application is it gets scored, much like you would a school test. And based on the score is based on how many licenses the state issues. So let's use the math that everyone can understand. If you scored an 80 on your application and someone scored a 90, the person who got the 90 is going to get the license, and you may not get the license at 80. If you don't use the right security company to help you write that, you can lose points in that security section, whether they misquote regulations by that state, or they try and cut and paste or use something else, or ChatGPT didn't do exactly what they were supposed to do, or their spelling, or they just communicated it wrong. That's the first way. Now, the other way is called a lottery. Minnesota just had one this week. And you have to still submit a security plan. And again, it goes back to, now we're talking about a city. And if the city's only going to allow 3 people in the town, and your security plan is horrible, your floor plan's bad, what are you going to do for an emergency? The chief of police never reviewed it, or he reviewed it and didn't like it, which just happened in New Jersey, where the person in front of me was presenting and he was not a security consultant in cannabis, and the city just denied them straight out solely on the security plan. So it's important to make sure that whoever you're vetting actually knows what they're doing. And you wouldn't use a lawyer unless you vetted them. You wouldn't use a real estate agent you wouldn't use a mechanic unless you vetted them. So why would you not vet somebody on an application you're going to spend somewhere between $30,000 and $100,000 on?
So there's a lot of things that you can do to vet working with the company, but I think everyone should vet anyone they work with, so you can do your due diligence and look for the red flags, right? If you don't vet them and all of a sudden the shit hits the fan, pardon my French, you could just blow up your whole application, which was my next question, is how a poor security plan can tank an application or winning that license. Were there any other things that people could do that could potentially tank winning that license regarding anything around security for the application?
Well, I think the key thing, any of these security plans, is first of all, you have to be truthful in what you're saying you're going to do.
Yeah.
And if you start embellishing what you plan on doing or not doing, I think that's important. A lot of times communicating that, because especially if you get caught in a lie during your application process, the city or the state's going to say, what else are they lying about? And like you said about the vetting process, if you went to get your car fixed and you went to a mechanic and the mechanic said, I've never worked on cars before. I've worked on airplanes, but I've never worked on cars before. You wouldn't drop your car off there to get done, even though he might have been a great airplane mechanic. Time and time again, I see cannabis people utilizing people who have never done this in this industry, assuming that the two, how hard could it be? How much of a different stretch could it be from what they used to do to what they're doing now? And I wouldn't want to be that company that takes the chance on somebody who's never done it or done it very sporadically. And we do see that a lot. In fact, we do risk assessments where we'll go out to locations and we'll do the actual review of their security, the 360. We do a lot in Colorado, a lot in Oregon, a lot in Washington, because those were the earlier states that have been up and open for a while and may want to look at, see, and is there a way to help on their margins? And on a lot of occasions, we'll go there is we'll see that the security program they had is a poor program to begin with. And I always say jokingly, our best salespeople are the dishonest people that take advantage of you, because you should have never had a glass window to begin with that wasn't reinforced. You should have never had a gun safe. You had a blind spot that no one knew about. The bathroom window opens. The employees don't have to ring all the sales so they can pocket some of that. You're losing non-cannabis products. There's a company that we do work with. They sell sweatshirts with the name on it. They're $80 sweatshirts. That's their biggest shrinkage in the cannabis industry. Not cannabis, sweatshirts.
Yeah. I also see too that sometimes people don't install the ballards or anything concrete along exposed walls.
Mhm.
And I'm always trying to educate people. I worked in these facilities. I probably have had 2 or 3 cars drive through the wall of our cultivation facility and our dispensary in the early days. I still see cars driving through dispensaries. And when I'm walking the perimeter, I'm always like, hey, what are you going to put here? Here's this big wall. Look at how much room they have to hit the gas to do Mach 90. And it's not even their car. They stole the car, right? They stole the car that they're going to ram through the wall and they're going to steal everything and smash and grab. And even if you lock everything in a safe, they're still going to knock down your wall. They're going to go in and tear up the inside of your dispensary. So why not just put up the concrete barriers to protect that exposed wall and save yourself some money and not go through all that pain.
Sure.
Are you seeing any kind of shifts in how these licenses are being awarded? And I know we talked a little bit about, I guess, more competitive versus scoring and lottery.
We're seeing more and more lottery. Part of what we do, because we've been doing this 12 years, is we'll help people find licenses, buy licenses, sell licenses, buy their businesses, sell their businesses. One of the things that the lottery industry has hurt the cannabis industry in some ways is actual funding. And the reason being is during merit-based licensing processes, a person who's looking to get funding or investors actually has a little bit more of a tangible of why they won, their plan won, and they actually showed and demonstrated to either a state or a city or whatever that they deserve to have the license. The lottery is more of a gamble. Where I'm seeing problems in states like, say, Maryland, or is that there's a lot of times where people are saying, I'm not going to invest in your location simply because I don't know if you can run your location. So there is a challenge when it goes from a merit base or to a lottery. And then even in the towns, even within some of these towns, if you're the only dispensary or grow in that town, your license is worth a lot more than if there are 50 in that same town.
Yeah. And I always liked the merit-based applications where they're scoring first. And too bad we can't have a little bit of a hybrid. And maybe there are places doing more hybrids. I haven't been doing application writing in a while, but I liked getting scored versus the lottery, because then you're vetting
Yeah.
the skill set of the person that's going to be opening this business. So why not score? Why not still do the scoring and the merit based and then throw it into a lottery? And then we have everyone in the lottery. We know they've been vetted and scored, and then it's randomly picked them from the lottery. Are people doing it that way as well?
Haven't seen that yet. I think that there's some versions, but I have not seen that. I think the states are starting to move that way, especially the ones that have done lotteries in the past, simply because they're seeing that the business isn't there, that the state thought would be there because the money's not there to invest in it. And it's just not happening to the point that the states are comfortable compared to some of the better cannabis programs. If you look at a good cannabis program, you and I both come from Jersey, but Jersey does have a very good program and a very good procedure compared to Oklahoma.
They did a good job. I think they looked at what was going on across the country. They probably looked at Illinois at the time and was like, okay, we don't want to be that mess, because it was a mess. But more than anything, it's lawsuits. And I think these states and cities don't want to be sued
Sure.
anymore. And I feel like lottery, in a way, protects them a
I
little
agree.
bit.
No, I agree.
What are some key elements that are required in a security plan?
So you really want to design a security plan to prevent any losses from occurring, whether that's a break-in or a robbery or employee theft. 80% of all the losses in the cannabis industry, if not more, are employee theft, more so in the cultivation and manufacturing than the 80%. But you want to be able to present a plan that encompasses the day-to-day processes. What happens in an emergency situation? What happens if someone had, God forbid, a heart attack? What happens if there was a robbery? How do you act? What if there was a fire? What if there was a break-in? How do you open your store? How do you close your store? So you really want that plan, that SOP, to really encompass all of those components. Does the store know how the camera system works? If you're a multi-store operator, do you have different camera systems? So your store manager at store A goes to store B that day. Is it the same camera system? How does the alarm system work? Who gets notified if there's an alarm that
Yeah.
occurs? What do they do? So all of those nuts and bolts of how to run a proper business come into play. And I think that's what that security plan really needs to address.
Yeah. No, I think that's really helpful. So I'm going to move into security after winning the license. So a couple things around just getting operational. Bring those plans that you're talking about into reality. What are some things operators can do to keep the momentum going when it comes to implementing their security plans, requirements during the build out phase, and also the operational phase once they get open?
So we do a lot of training. We either do on-site training. We were just in California today doing that. And we're training people about the security employees that are there. Because of the turnover, you want to continue to make sure that everyone understands what's expected. And even from an insurance point of view or legal point of view, you want to make sure that everyone has been educated and trained, because you want to be able to say, if there were ever a lawsuit, that you responded as per your security plan or handled that situation as per your security plan, and there was training that was done. We also do a lot of virtual training. We work with a large training company based out of California who's been doing this for years, and we have a training module for dispensary owners and so forth in cultivation. But I think the key really is having a security plan that somebody has given you and written, and maybe that even helped you get the license, and doing nothing with that plan is not a recipe for being successful in this industry.
Yeah, I think sometimes I wouldn't necessarily hand my security plan over to my employees, but I would pull some of the most important things that relates to the employees' jobs and roles, and I would take that information and then create some type of day-to-day SOP around it that pull elements in, I guess, coincide and work with that security plan. I think training is key. I think training, SOPs, ongoing training. And I think it is important to do situational awareness training and
Sure.
just really prepare people. I'm interested in what you talked about for the 80% theft. Is that 80% of theft is employees in the dispensary side?
Correct. And
Wow.
closer to 90% in the grows and manufacturing.
Wow. What can people do? What kind of system or what can people do to try to prevent that?
There's so many things that you can do. Ask yourself this one question. Have you ever checked any employees' bags before they left at the end of their shift? 99% of your viewers are going to say no. I've never even thought about doing that, or even waiting at the end of the night. Your sales start to diminish. Is it because your employees are not ringing all the sales and keeping the money? When's the last time you've done an inventory of your product to make sure, and if there is a loss, identifying that? Do you have what we call a culture of honesty program in your company, which basically explains that theft is not going to be tolerated? I've been to grow facilities where the master grower was allowed to take home cannabis every night. It was just part of the tribute, I guess, they pay that person. What does that tell everyone else at that location? If he can take home some, I can take 3 or 4 buds home. We've had the trimming room, which is the biggest
Woo!
theft issue. The trimming room has been not enough cameras, not enough follow-up. These are sometimes seasonal employees. What's your waste disposal program? So there's a lot of avenues that will get taken advantage of if somebody isn't looking at that and communicating that, which opens you up to that kind of exposure.
Yeah, you listed some top ones that I definitely know that exist. One, I didn't know the percentage was that high. And just like you, I do a lot of audits and I prepare people to get operational. One thing I always tell them to implement is the inspection of the bag. I just did a training this week with a client who's launching a dispensary, and we announced that we would be checking bags, and you should have seen the look on everyone's face. They were
Sure.
shocked that you're like, for a dispensary? And absolutely. And I think employees are smart enough to figure out how to steal product. And I think the one thing that you talked about, physical inventory, that's the key.
Oh,
You
yeah.
should be counting your inventory daily. And if you have a lot of SKUs and you're a really big store, then you can do flour one day, concentrates the next, and you can break them into categories. But every week, in most states, this is all being tracked. It's really important because you're going to be held responsible for the theft. That's the thing, is you can't just say, "Oh, they stole from me. I'm sorry." You potentially get a violation for that because you didn't have the right processes in place, or you weren't monitoring, or you didn't have a compliance program that was managing to reduce theft. And that number is shocking on the cultivation side. And I would say the trim room is where I've seen a lot of theft because they tuck the buds into the rubber gloves. They tuck them into the gloves, they tuck them into their sleeves, they wear layers of clothes, they find ways to get them into layers of clothes and pockets.
The thing you have to realize is any employee's gonna get paid their value. Whether you pay them in a salary and they do something unethical and steal the rest of it, or you pay them the proper salary and they don't. But it depends what the atmosphere is. There are some locations have great atmosphere. There are some locations that every single person at that location is stealing. And sometimes the owner even looks the other way around because he can't fill the position. So he allows that to go on. The problem is it's like a virus. You know, if one person is stealing because they need to buy whatever pizza with it, and nobody ever addresses that, then the next person's going to say, well, they can steal, I can steal. The perfect example is if you walk by a building and the windows, half the windows are blown out and there's a rock, you might pick up a rock and throw it at the window. You may not, but it depends. But if there's no windows broken, it's very unlikely that anyone else is going to throw a rock and break that window because no one's ever broken it before. And that you see that happen in cannabis industries all the time where the virus goes unchecked and then everybody, even the ones that were honest now, wind up doing things that they never would have thought of doing because the owner condoned it. He let it happen.
I think it comes down to a choice. And I think tone is everything in these facilities. And I think leadership, and I think if there's a virus, it's happening from the top. If you're an owner, you cannot turn a blind eye to what's going on in your cannabis operation because everyone's going to mimic you. You're the leader. As the owner, you're looked up to as a leader. This is your business. So if you're not being a responsible owner or taking compliance seriously, or turning a blind eye, then everyone underneath you is going to treat your company the same way that you're treating your own company.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's some really good stuff. And thanks for sharing those percentages. I had no idea. I would have thought it would have been more external theft than internal theft.
No, but think about it. There's so much security in a cannabis facility. The chances of stealing are much more remote than if you were going to go into another retail type of environment. Shoplifting, although there is shoplifting, is way lower than if you would see it in a convenience store or another similar location.
And wrapping up, what kind of tips do you have for maintenance and compliance during the operational phase and just long term?
I think it's important to make sure that, especially we're talking from security, if something is not working, you need to make sure that is fixed. The camera doesn't operate anymore, or the alarm system has a blind spot for whatever reason. One of the sensors went bad, or access control. Now you have to put a trash can to keep the door open, type of thing. Because it also communicates to everyone else that, that you have a problem. So that needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. From the maintenance point of view, I go into some locations and the cameras are dirty. And again, I'm talking about security, but it could be anything. The thing I think of is they don't really care. Look how dirty that camera is. No one's ever cleaned the dust off of it, especially like a white camera would show it. What else are they not doing? Like I said, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I call it the bathroom theory. If I go in that bathroom is really disgusting,
Mm,
what does that tell me about the people that work in that location if that bathroom is disgusting? Because they don't care. They use that bathroom even if it's disgusting. Same thing when it comes to security. Cameras pointing in the wrong direction because someone hit it with a stick late at night. Branches are blocking the camera view. No one,
obstruction.
you can see the cameras behind the register and you see the three of them aren't working. What kind of message now are you sending to me, not only as a customer, but maybe someone who wants to do something? And then you should have somebody come in at least once a year, if not more, and
Yeah.
just do an inspection of the facility. You'd be amazed how many times I've found the bathroom window unlocks and you can go to the bathroom, bring cannabis in there and push it out the window and somebody on the other side picks it up, or you just throw it
Wow.
out in the back and you come pick it up. And they're like, never realized that bathroom window didn't lock.
Wow, that's really wild stuff. I like the bathroom analogy. Those are some really good, helpful hints. I know it's hard sometimes for operators to want to spend money to have an outside person come in and just do an inspection. A lot of times people say the city comes in once a year, the state comes in once a year. But A lot of times for those annual audits, they're glancing. They're doing like this surface walkthrough. It's not a deep dive. They're not looking in all the layers. They're not checking every single rule and regulation. They're not spending 8 hours, 6 hours in there. They've got multiple facilities they've got to go in and out of. So a lot of times I think they can be in and out in an hour. Now, some states might differ. I'm just giving some examples, but I do know a lot of people just wait for the regulators to come in and tell them what they've done wrong. But I think it's a risk because one, they're not your compliance person. You're not paying them to be your compliance person. They might not even tell you all the things that are wrong. They might just come in and check your cameras, or they might come in and check these other things, but they might not look at everything, which leaves you exposed. So I think working with somebody to come help you, just to look under the hood of your business to make sure everything is running appropriately, is a well worth investment, a once a year investment to make in your business.
I agree.
Because you're really investing in yourself, you're investing in your business, you're investing in your employees, and you're investing in the business being healthy long term. I think, what was that culture? What were you calling that? Honest?
Culture of honesty.
Oh, I always say culture compliance, but I love culture of honesty too. And I'm 100% for that. I really appreciate you being here today. I think this is really helpful. And hopefully, our listeners were able to learn something about security and around the licensing phase, and also when you get operational regarding security. And I'm going to be posting Tony's information on my YouTube channel. And for those who would like to check out the YouTube channel, you can go to Under the Microscope at 𝗪𝗓. And for those who like to listen to the podcast, you can go ahead and listen on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Pandora, and iHeartRadio. So thanks again for joining me today, Tony. I really appreciate all your experience and knowledge a lot.
Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome.